Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 116.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Debbi King. She's an author and speaker, and she's going to talk a lot about making college decisions and how to decide what your major and career path should be. She's got a lot of great information, and she also has information as far as budgeting and other areas in her books. So we have a great interview with Debbi. Before we go into that interview, on Brad Recommends, we're going to talk about the true price of college. I think that's something that all families need to understand and figure out what the true price of college is going to be for them specifically, instead of kind of the general statistics out there. And then we're going to talk a bit about rental property. So if your family happens to own some form of rental property, there's a key information that you need to understand as well. As always, show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/116. Let's go ahead and jump into Brad Recommends.
The latest tips, tricks, and tools you can use today. This is Brad Recommends on Taming the High Cost of College.
Today on Brad Recommends, our core area is the true price of college. I think for many families, you really need to understand what college is actually going to cost. And that's a challenge for most families. As you first start out, you need to start working on just kind of the general concepts of, will we qualify for need-based aid? Will we qualify for merit aid? What is our likelihood of pursuing scholarships at the colleges we're attending? And what's the opportunity to pursue scholarships outside of the colleges and go for private scholarships? And then in the end, how much will college actually cost our family? So that we can start building a budget and figuring out, well, if there's going to be a cost, and most of the time there is, a typical family might need to pay $10,000 or $20,000 per year towards the college expenses, and some of the rest of it is covered by grants or scholarships or other types of aid. Well, what you need to figure out what that net price is, again, so you can start building a budget and saying, well, this is how much we plan on borrowing, this is how much we have saved, this is how much we can save and actually pay during the college years. So you might have a line item in your budget where you spend $500 a month towards college on top of what you've saved. So you need to understand what the true price of college is going to be for your family and for your kids. So if you have, again, a student that's likely to win scholarships, that may change the price, especially at private schools, compared to other schools. Now, the optional area I want to talk about is rental property. Some families out there are dealing with college and they own rental property at the same time. So if you own rental property, you need to understand how that fits into the college mix. So as an example, rental property is generally considered an asset when we fill out our financial aid forms. Now, it's also the net value of that real estate. So if you have a, say, a 4-family rental and it's worth, say, $400,000, but you also have a mortgage for $300,000, well, obviously, when you list it on your financial aid forms, you're going to use the net value. In other words, the $400,000 minus the $300,000 mortgage. But you could actually go farther than that if you'd like. You can also deduct, fix-up costs and realtor fees and taxes, and figure out what the actual check would be at closing should you sell that property. In other words, well, yes, I would sell it for $400,000, but I'd have to pay off the mortgage for $300,000, and I'd have to pay the realtor 6%, so there's another $24,000 that I'd have to give to the realtor, and there's probably $10,000 of repairs and closing costs that we're going to have to deal with. So you can net all that out and say that that property is net value of, say, $40,000 or whatever that might be, even though on paper sometimes you list it as $100,000, again, when you're pursuing loans, that type of thing. So you really need to understand how to value rental property. Now, the second piece of the puzzle is when you own rental property, it's a form of a business in many families where you could do things like shift income and shift assets to the children in order to help with either financial aid or taxes or both. So as an example, it's not unusual for parents to hire their kids to help them maintain the property. Again, you have a 4-family, you send your 16-year-old over there to mow the lawn once a week, and it takes him a couple hours, so you pay him $50 every time he goes. And that's deductible to mom and dad as an expense, and that becomes taxable to the student as income. Now, a lot of students don't pay taxes or don't pay much in taxes because their income is relatively low. So that may be a strategy to save some taxes. And as long as the student saves that money for college, just like mom or dad would have done with it, well, then we are money ahead because we pay less in taxes. All right, so figuring out the true price of college is something everybody needs to do. Rental property is an optional area that you may need to study if you own rental property, of course. So that's Brad Recommends. Let's go ahead and jump into the interview. All right, today I'm sitting down with Debbi King. She is an author and speaker. Welcome, Debbi.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So you do a lot of writing and speaking, etc., around the financial areas. One of your books is The ABCs of Personal Finance, as an example. But before we get into kind of your core content, so to speak, let's talk a little bit about what you do and how you do it and how you came to be doing it.
Okay, sure, no problem. First, I'll give you the why. Back when I graduated college many years ago, I won't say how many, I came out into the world. I was debt-free. I was blessed back then that my parents were able to cash flow my college. And most parents back then, did do that. It was something that they saved for, and it was a goal of theirs. And, most of my friends graduated debt-free back then. But I went out into the world and kind of expected to have everything that my parents had immediately, not really grabbing that realization that it had taken them 30 or 40 years, a lot of processes, a lot of sacrifices, and moving up from starting small, then moving to bigger and bigger. And I really didn't get how they got that. And the only way I could get it coming fresh out of college was debt, credit cards, loans, whatever. So I found myself several years later, basically a single mom making about $10,000 a year and over $200,000 in debt. And I just had an aha moment. I can't tell you it was some, tragic story or whatever. It was just this moment I had in my living room of, I just can't do this anymore. This is ridiculous. And I don't know how, but I just can't live like this anymore. So I basically started over. Obviously, I had not learned all I needed to learn, and I was an accounting major. So, I had taken courses in money and all of that, but I didn't really get it. And the reason is because personal finance is about 10% math and 90% emotion. I got the math part of it really easy, and most of us do, but I didn't get the emotional part of it. So I just basically started over. I filed for bankruptcy. I worked out, plans and did what I needed to do. But I started over in several places. I went all the way back to my grandmother, like how she lived and what her priorities were and things like that. My parents, who had been very successful, obviously, they had been able to, cash flow my college, but they didn't have, these awesome, they weren't like CEOs. They weren't presidents of companies, own companies. They were just your average middle American, family. So I looked at how they did it. For me, as a faith person, I went to the Bible. I read books, all kind of different books, and I finally figured it out. It took me many, many years. Obviously, that's a lot of debt, but I finally got debt free. And I sat there and I'm like, I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. And I knew many people at that point were going through it. America was in a major debt crisis, not just student loans, but just credit card debt, housing debt, just everything. And I didn't want to see them do that. So I took both of my degrees, my accounting degree and my teaching degree, and basically just started my own business of helping people, coaching them and working with them one-on-one. And then it morphed into a book that I wrote, and that covers 26 A through Z, different areas. It covers a lot of the emotionals. It covers the math as well. It's written on a level where anybody can read it, teenager to 90-year-old, it doesn't matter. And I wrote it that way with a purpose, to help everybody. And then that kind of morphed into workshops and speaking, and that's where I am today.
Right. So you're out there helping people on the financial side of things. What do you see when it comes to, I guess, college loans, parents trying to figure out how to pay for college? What's kind of the lay of the land from your perspective?
Well, sadly, I see a lot of stress, and I see a lot of panic and a lot of non-preparation. And it's because the parents, as myself, I'm a parent of a college kid, and we kind of took care of ourselves and did, we always looked at, I think, a lot of us looked at college as this thing way in the future. And we didn't prepare the way we should have. And a lot of parents find themselves in their own struggles, and yet here it is, it's caught up with them. Their kid wants to go to college, and they have no way to just write a check like my parents did. The cost of college has grown exponentially. I mean, it's just crazy what college costs anymore, to go and get that education. But I also think there's a huge myth out there, and one of the things I hope we're going to talk about today is that college is necessary, that every single person who graduates high school needs to go to college, that it's a need, not a want. And that's a major myth. College is something that, yes, maybe you need it if your passion requires it. And that's the first step that kids need to take, is finding out what their passion is. So I find that there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myths. I try to debunk some of those. I try to convince, and we put the cart before the horse so many times. There are kids who graduate college, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and they went through college for something that they could really care less about. Maybe they went because their parents wanted them to. Maybe they went because it was something that a career that made a lot of money, but they really hate it, So that's one of my, missions, is to basically make sure we go in the right order when looking at this college thing, because believe it or not, college is not for everybody.
Right. Absolutely. I don't remember exactly the name of the video, but I'll try and track it down and put it in the show notes. But I watched a video that essentially talked about how there is, some professional jobs and there's some college degree jobs, but then there's many support jobs that require, 2-year certificates or apprenticeships or other paths. And that area of education is completely ignored by a large swath of, counselors and parents, etc.
Yeah, my daughter, she just graduated last year from high school. And so I've recently been through this with her. And, my mother, God bless her, was a person who was, she needs to go to college. She needs to go, because she's from that generation who didn't have the opportunity to go to college. So that generation, 70s and 80-year-olds, to them, it is mandatory. You have to get that education. They don't quite understand it. But I worked with her, and her school actually worked with her to find out what her passion was. And she has several, but it was what she really wanted to do every day. And I ask everybody to ask themselves the question, what would I do if I could do it for free? If money wasn't an issue, what would I do? And she job shadowed a lot of things. She had a job in a bridal shop. She loves fashion. She's a fashion diva, and she really can make, decent money at that. She also wanted to maybe be a kindergarten teacher, so she job shadowed that. But her real thing was forensics, looking, and those are three completely different things, so she had to find out what it was that she wanted to do. And in doing so, she realized her passion was in forensic psychology, criminal justice, getting into the minds of people and kind of helping to change their lives. And so that's what she is going to do now. But she had to establish her passion before we could say if she was going to be a bridal consultant, she didn't need to go to college for that. But what she chose to be, she does need to go to college. So then we worked on that after that.
Right. So then, I guess as you're working with parents, I think we run into this situation a lot where, maybe they haven't built the budget and haven't saved that big pot of money. So what is your recommendation when parents feel like they're coming up short for college as far as ways that they can either save more or reduce costs, or what kind of areas do you work in there?
Well, first of all, I try to help the parents understand that it's not solely their responsibility. A lot of parents feel guilty, and a lot of parents feel like that it's their job to send their kids to college. And it actually isn't. Now, I have worked with my daughter. We will always work with her. We will always support her, and hopefully you can do that. But you can never put your own future ahead of like your kid, because there's options for them. So you don't necessarily need to ruin your future, financial future, mortgage everything you have to make sure that they go to some high-end, great university. As my grandmother used to say, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And there's a lot of ways to get that college education that you need to get. And you do it based on your budget. So, for instance, if you need that 4-year degree, if you're going to be a teacher, for example, you need a 4-year degree. You can't get a teaching job without it. However, you can go to community college for 2 years and then transfer to a university. A student can work 40 hours a week and go to school as well, or somewhere around that 30, 40, whatever, and make some money themselves. And then you can contribute what you can do. And together you can work and pay for as much as you can of it. Students need to make it and my daughter did all this on her own. You need to make it almost a second job for them in high school, especially their last 2 years of high school, to get on that scholarship train and get on there and find out every single scholarship out there that's available to them. Because even if it's $100 scholarship, they add up, and they add up fast if you get 300 of them or 30 of them or whatever. They add up really, really fast. So there's a lot of things. Parents need to partner with their children, not do it for them. They need, because your children are growing into adults. You're raising adults. I'd like to share for 1 second just something with the college that my daughter goes to. There's a parent group on Facebook. And when she first left last September, there were so many posts about, well, I need to do this for my daughter or my son. I need to do this for them. And the staff there kept saying, no, you don't. They're adults now. I can't even get her grades because she's an adult now. You need to understand that when they hit that 18, they are adults. So it becomes a partnership and not where you're the sole, you're solely responsible for them.
Right. Absolutely. I think if you talk to college administrators and college professors, et cetera, there is that transition where I think a lot of parents are a little more involved than the colleges appreciate, because again, they're adults and they have their own rights now, and the parents need to back off a little and let the students take charge. Now, I think that's a big challenge if you haven't done a little bit of letting the student take charge through high school. I mean, that's a whole discussion in and of itself. Let's assume that we are trying to keep the costs low and we do the community college thing, but we ultimately then still need to fill the gaps with some sort of loans. I'm assuming you've worked with new graduates, et cetera, that maybe graduated with a little more loans than they wanted, so to speak, and now they're kind of saying, well, now what do I do? Is there ways or strategies to help pay down debt?
Absolutely. The first thing is it has to become your number one goal. You can't accept, and again, this is something that people just kind of like, it's no big deal. They take on these student loans and they accept them. It's basically, people put that under good debt category. And to me, there is no good debt category, but it's labeled that but the only good debt would be maybe a house where you have an asset behind it. Anything where you owe money and there's nothing attached to it is not a good debt. if you went into debt and if you needed to, and I know people do, I'm a realist. I get that. I try to teach people to go 100% cash, but sometimes it's just not going to happen. But if that happens, and first of all, my first recommendation is don't wait till you graduate. You can pay on student loans, even though Sally Mae or whoever you got your loan from gives you a grace period of not paying on it, for 4 years or 3 years or whatever till they graduate. Pay on that loan, pay it down even while they're still in school. If the kid goes, gets a summer job, then let that money go toward that loan. So don't wait, don't procrastinate is the first thing. And then if you get out and you still have loans, make that a priority to pay that off before you buy a new car, before you buy a new house, before you do all these things. Do that. If you can still live with your parents, if you can get a roommate, if you can just rent a room from somebody, just lower every budget item that you can and put all that extra money to it and get rid of it. Because you have no idea, and most kids don't even look at it, how much interest you are paying by just keeping that loan sitting out there, not paying on that principal and paying that down.
Right. Yeah, because another example I always show parents is, while kids are in college and they have roommates and they're living on campus or off campus, their entire room and board budget, et cetera, is, somewhere around $10,000. Some areas, obviously, it's a little more expensive and other areas less. But once you graduate, if the first thing you do is go out and learn how to spend your new high salary because you've got your first good job, it'll be very hard to get your loans taken care of. Whereas if you just continue to live like a college student for another year or two, a lot of times you can clean up the debt very quickly.
Yeah, and that's very important. I mean, I got into all of my debt right after college, but it's the same concept. It's going out there, living, you get that first paycheck and it's like, now I'm really an adult, and you go out trying to live this adult life, and you really need to just focus and get that debt. You don't want that debt carrying over into, future, like your marriage and your children. You just don't want that hanging over your head when you go to buy a house or you want to get a new car or whatever it is that your goals and dreams are. You don't want that looming over you for the 20 or 30 years that most of these, if you just settle into your payment plan and that's all you pay every month and you make that just part of your budget, then if that's all you pay, you're going to be paying for 20 or 30 years. That's the same as a mortgage. Same time span as a mortgage. But if you can just really get in there and focus and just kick butt on it and just make that your top priority, you're right. Within a year or two, most people, unless they've gone to doctor school or something, most people can get out of debt really quickly.
Right. So you mentioned a little bit about when you're choosing a school and choosing to go off to college, kind of on the emotional side again. Certainly there's the dollars and cents, but a lot of, your presentations and stuff are on the emotional side. So can you discuss that a little bit as far as how the emotions in college, and obviously you were just through it as well, kind of play into this?
Yeah, I can use my example. My daughter's currently going to a private school who is one of the top ranked schools in the country for criminal justice. And that was not because we went out. It cost her, I think it's $50,000 a year to go. And it's not because we have 50 grand laying around and we can go cash flow it. And it's not because we went out and took, $200,000 out in loans either. We found a way for her. She can only go to that school because of her scholarships and her grades and the money that has been set aside and saved, and the fact that we are cash flowing it. And she's doing that through her jobs. She works 2 jobs. She's working while she's in school. But most of it she did get through scholarships, I will say, and that was something that has to start in high school. You have to focus on that. When we had that discussion in 10th, 11th grade with her, she realized that if she wanted to go to that dream school, then that's what she was going to need to do. And that's what she did. She worked hard at way over half of her school is paid, because it is a private school, so they do get more scholarships than you would get at a public school, obviously. But she had such grades that they, gave her scholarships, and actually her grades are continuing in school. So she is actually getting more scholarships, even though she's in college. So it doesn't stop just because they start college. She's over Christmas break, she applied for like 20 scholarships. So it's a constant ongoing thing to find that money. But that's a blessing that she had and that some people do have. And if you have that, that's great. But the other thing you have to realize is it's okay if you didn't. She would have been okay, and she would have probably gotten almost as good of an education somewhere else in that same field. But this was her dream. This is what she wanted, and she went and made it happen. And that's what kids have to do. But you have to encourage them and help them to do that. Not all kids are quite as self-motivated as my daughter. She just happens to be that way. But there's so many kids that don't do that. And there's so many kids that totally 100% turn to their parents. And they'll say, I want to go to this private school. Now write me a check.
Right.
And, that is something that has to be, you have to learn as a parent that 2-letter word that is people hate to say, but it's no, or if you want to do this, let's find a way. But us writing a check is not the answer. And it may be a hard lesson that some kids have to learn. And that's one of the things that parents aren't really good at. And it was hard for me too, to let those kids fall down. I have a stepson who actually did not listen to me, even though I teach this. He did not listen to me. And he went out and took out a bunch of loans. And now he struggles because he can't find a job. He graduated. He went to school like a little later in life. He was about 21, 22 when he started, already an adult out on his own. But he knows that I teach this, and we taught him this when he was a teenager. And yet he went out and did exactly the opposite. And there's nothing I can do but just kind of cry with him because he's struggling now to pay that monthly payment. And he just sees this. And it wasn't even that much. It was maybe $20,000, that he had to take out over the course of 4 years, which actually isn't a lot, but he is struggling with that. And that's hard as a parent to see. And we could write a check for it and make it all okay. But that's not what is going to help him. What's going to help him is this kick in the pants of, and kind of the you made your bed, you have to lie in it now. But we're there to support him and love on him and help him in other ways. But we're just not going to write that check, even though we could.
Right. Give us a little peek into those discussions or family meetings, or I don't know what they might have been, but when you had the sophomore and junior, where you were kind of laying the groundwork of this is how college is going to go. What types of things did you talk about? How often did you do it? Was it a big formal thing, or was it just chit-chatting while you're driving around in the car? How did you lay the groundwork for the college discussions, etc.?
Well, I always tried the big, let's sit down and have a discussion with my daughter. And that wasn't her style. And that's probably not most teenagers' style. They're going to probably tune you out. So I finally learned after the first 1 or 2 of those to just casually drop things when we would be at the mall. We'd be driving to the mall. It's half an hour away. We have a discussion. I would even discuss stuff if we were on vacation and just laying out in the sun. We'd have a conversation. She knew where I came from, and maybe it's a little more passionate for me because I teach it. So she probably got more than she bargained for, but in the long run, she also probably learned more than some may learn because it is my field. But I did find that with teenagers, I do think most of the time, and you have to know your teenager. You have to have that relationship. What kind of relationship do you have? And also, it may be that, my daughter and I, against all odds, have an awesome relationship. A lot of mothers and daughters don't, but maybe the father does. So you need to maybe whoever can get through, in other words, the kid won't put their guard up, and it might be a mother-son, that kind of thing. I don't know. But kind of know your family dynamic. You have to be honest about it and what's going to work. But I do recommend just having that conversation, throwing those things in and not overwhelming them, but just starting that conversation. She knew from the beginning that we were only going to pay we had saved and budgeted for community college for 2 years and a state school after that, but only so much of that in living at home. So if she wanted to go beyond that, she knew that it was on her. And we were always honest about that. That is key one. Don't play around with your kids and don't say, well, maybe this and maybe that, and we might could do this. Know what you can do. Know your own finances enough to know what you can do. Be honest with them. Frankly, if you can't do anything, be honest with them so that they know it's on them. They know that they have to figure it out. So honesty is really the key in the conversations. But I highly recommend kind of weaning it in when you can, willing to get it in there when you can, not just sitting down lecturing them about it, because odds are teenagers are going to tune you out.
Right. So you essentially had kind of a predetermined budget as far as maybe a total dollar amount, or this amount for 2 years and this amount for 2 more years. And you said, that's it. That's what we're contributing. And when did you actually tell her that something that specific? You remember?
Probably her junior year. I would say around her junior year. I wanted to, kids really don't understand the money thing. Even if you talk to them about it all the time and stuff, until they have their own money, that's really the eye-opening thing for them. So when she started her job at age 16, she knew, when she would go buy something, she could put it all together. She would say, if I want this dress, that's 4 hours of work for me to buy this dress. Is it worth it? So she could really associate, what it took to get that money, how many hours we had to work or she had to work to get that money. So she really started to understand money and the relationship with money once she got a job at age 16. So that was when the conversations, got ramped up a little bit. You don't want to wait till their senior year, because if you wait till then, it may be too late, and you do have to actually do a lot during your senior year to prepare for that, because, she had to apply and was accepted by December of her senior year. So you can't wait till their senior year to have this conversation. It needs to be an ongoing conversation. You can start as early as sophomore, but really ramp it up their junior year.
All right. So I guess you mentioned that you have a stepson, so it sounds like you're no longer single, so you had a husband involved in this as well?
Yes.
So when did the two of you start discussing what our plans for college were? Do you remember?
Well, with each kid, it was different. We had 5 total. Some of them were already grown when I came into the picture, though, kind of doing their own college thing. They were in college already. With the stepson, we just basically told him the same thing, but he had decided to not go to college right after high school. And then later on, he decided to go. So at that point, he was an adult living on his own, living in another state. So we kind of knew we weren't going to help him financially necessarily. I did help him, and I always will. And my kids are never too grown for me to help them with advice and with life lessons and with guiding them if they ask me, which way to go. And he did, but again, he went against that advice. But my daughter had lived with us, the entire time. So, he and I had always had a conversation of just what we could do within our budget. And we had invested that amount specifically for that based on what we made. And at that time, now, obviously both of our incomes have, grown as our careers have moved forward and progressed since that time. But it really didn't change our budget, because all of that needs to go into our future and our lives. He's, older than me, and he's closer to retirement age. And we need to make sure that we have our house in order, because if not, the burden at that point could go back to our kids. And that's the last thing we want. We don't want that vicious cycle, of, okay, we'll help you. Well, now you have to help us because we helped you.
Right.
It kind of becomes, let's all work together and we'll help ourselves, but let's all work together to make sure that, it works to the best.
Right. Absolutely. If people are kind of struggling with overall finances and that type of thing, and as you mentioned earlier that you've got a couple books, so let's spend a couple minutes talking about your books and what they cover and how they might fit into this whole college planning, financial planning, or financial coaching, and all the different areas that parents need to work with. So the book I'm looking at here right on Amazon is called The ABCs of Personal Finance. Can you explain a little bit about what that's about and who would read that and that type of thing?
Yeah, that's my baby. I'm very proud of that book for a lot of reasons. And I've gotten a lot of compliments that verify my reasons for writing it, which is always great. My reason for writing that was a lot of people, especially in the area of their money, they don't want to talk about it. I actually do very little coaching because people don't want to come and sit in front of somebody and spill out about their money. Money is an area, it's very taboo still. People are ashamed, and even though I say no judgment, no, and obviously I had stupid with 12 zeros attached to it. I mean, I'm not one to judge anybody and never would, but people they don't like that. So I thought, well, let me give them a way that they can learn everything that I would possibly teach in the privacy of their own home. They could sit in a park bench, they could sit in their home, they could hide, whatever, but they could still learn all the things that I learned. It's pretty much everything I learned getting out of $200,000 worth of debt. And it covers anything from, like I said, each chapter is a letter, so it's A through Z. But it covers things like need and want, like really understanding your needs versus your wants, because we have, and I include myself in that, have a really messed up view in today's world of a need and a want. Quick example, cell phone is a want, not a need. But people they can't relate that, like, cause they've been told I need a cell phone. I have to have a cell phone. But obviously if you're from the 80s, like I am, you live perfectly fine without a cell phone. So it's not a need, it's a want. Doesn't mean you can't have it, but it's just establishing that in your mind, can help you when making decisions. It also talks about savings and credit and debt, the difference in those things. A lot of people don't understand you can use a credit card and never go into debt. Credit card they're two separate things. Credit card is a way to pay for something. Debt is when you have taken on more than you have, when your liabilities outweigh your assets. It talks about your attitude, because, and to me, that's actually one of the keys that I found was your attitude and how you look at things, and how, are you a positive person or a negative person? Your thoughts, where do they go? I'll never be able to do this. Well, if you think that, you probably never will. You've got to just, have that positive attitude and that thankful attitude and different other ones. Even your perspective, how you look at your situation, or how you look at this college thing, how you look at your kids, and just everything about it can really make or break you sometimes. So the book just covers just everything, literally from A to Z. And it's written in such a way, and I did it on purpose, that, a teenager can read it, like I said, or a 90-year-old. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't even really matter whether you're in debt or not. There's a lot of things that if you're just struggling with your money and you're just not where you want to be, read the book and maybe you'll find out why you're not where you want to be. It actually comes with a workbook if you want to make it personal. If you want your kid to go through it, it comes with a workbook that asks you personal questions, about it. And that's also on Amazon as a separate thing.
All right. Well, great. I really appreciate all the great information, and people certainly can go to Amazon and check out your book. I would encourage that as well. If people want to learn more about you and get a hold of you, is there a way that they can do that as well?
Absolutely. You can always go to my website. It's debbiking.com. That's DEBBIKING.com. And everything about me is there. The links for the books, speaking, anything you want to, if you just want to contact me, it's all there. I also have a Facebook page, the ABCs of Personal Finance. You can find me on Twitter at Debbi King. And all of those, you can pretty much follow me anywhere.
All right. Well, great. I really appreciate all the great information, and we'll stay in touch.
Yes. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. That was a great interview with Debbi. Hopefully you learned a bit. I know I did. I would encourage you to go out and check out her books, and maybe, purchase one either for yourself or for your student, as a kind of a way to start learning the overall financial world and how it's going to impact your life. As always, show notes, tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/116. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, we look forward to hearing from you. You can pop us an email, give us a call. All the contact information is available as well at Taming the High Cost of College. That's all we have this week. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.